we now enter the season preview series era of the Views from the Shop podcast here in 2024. So, on today's show, we're going to cover what's to come on the show for the next month. But we got some news over last week. The Big Ten preseason media poll came out. It's not official. It's not sponsored by anything, but Adam Jardy helps kind of lead and contribute to a Big Ten media preseason poll. I'm going to tell you who voted for Ohio State number one. Only one media personality did. I'll tell you who voted for Ohio State number one. We'll talk about where they finished. Was it right? Was it wrong? All of those types of things. We'll also talk about some preseason honors earned by Buckeye guard Bruce Thornton. Some visits occurred over the weekend. We will chat about that with some commitment dates set as well to keep an eye on. And then finally, we're going to cover what's to come on this show in October, plus some personal type of news, not about me, but about the show in particular. So, a lot to hit today. Thanks for being here. If you're watching on YouTube, that's great. Enjoy. If you're listening on podcasts, that's great as well. Also enjoy. Tell a friend about the show. We're getting close to the season beginning, so your friends need to know about the show. If you haven't already subscribed on podcasts and on YouTube, please do. Make sure you're following on Twitter, on Instagram, and on Facebook. And like the video on YouTube if that's where you're watching. Don't be afraid to give a 5-star review on your podcast platforms. And all that said, we're just shy of 3 minutes and we're going to start talking about Ohio State basketball. So let's do that. First and foremost, let's cover the Big Ten preseason media poll. So that came out later last week. I put out, this is why you need to be following on the socials, by the way. I'm covering this on podcast form for the first time here on Tuesday. If you're already on Twitter, if you're already on Instagram, you already saw an instant reaction from me, but I'm going to cover that right now. So let me first take you 1 through 18, because that's what we want here. It's just to list off a bunch of teams. It's not at random, but it kind of is because it's a preseason poll. So here's how voters see the Big Ten playing out in college basketball this season. Number one, pretty overwhelmingly was pick Purdue. They got 21st place votes, Purdue finishing first. In second place, it's Indiana with 7 first place votes. Third, UCLA. And fourth, Illinois. Both of those teams receiving 2 first place votes. Michigan State 5th, Oregon 6th, Rutgers 7th, and Ohio State predicted to finish 8th with 1 lone first place vote. You go from there. Number 9 is Michigan, rounding out the top 10. Maryland, 11 through 18. You've got Iowa, Wisconsin, Nebraska, USC, Washington, and projected to finish outside of the top 15 and therefore outside of the Big Ten tournament, because 15 teams make the Big Ten tournament now. 15 teams make the Big Ten. Minnesota. Now, number 1. No, not really. What this really shows us more than anything else is how does the media covering the Big Ten see different programs and teams heading into this upcoming season. So, one note here, there's a clear drop-off between Purdue and the rest of the conference. Purdue gets 572 total points in this poll, then Indiana down to 549, and then another kind of steep drop-off from Indiana to UCLA, UCLA down to 510, and a clear drop-off between the top 9 and the bottom 9 as well. So the top 9 kind of buttoned by Purdue all the way down to Michigan. You get a drop of about 230-ish points between the top 9 teams, a drop of 230-ish points. And then you're dropping immediately by about 70 points from Michigan down to Maryland. So right now, the landscape of this conference is the top 9 teams expected to be really good. The bottom 9 teams expected to be a tier below, obviously, that top half, which includes, again, Iowa, Wisconsin, Nebraska, USC, Washington, Northwestern, Penn State, Minnesota. Not that you care where Northwestern is expected to finish in the Big Ten this season. What you do care about is Ohio State. The Buckeyes in that top 9 projected to finish 8th right now. Now, again, 15 teams make the tournament. Right now, Northwestern, Penn State, Minnesota, the 3 teams projected to be out. 3 takeaways right off the bat. You heard this on Twitter and on Instagram. I'm going to expand on this right now. So, FanDuel odds right now, if you go check it out, Purdue is the overwhelming favorite to win the conference. And this may be unprofessional, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to check FanDuel to find the most up-to-date odds right now, which I know, again, Purdue is projected to be number 1. Not a big drop-off when you go from number 2 to after that, essentially. So Purdue at plus 360 right now. Then you've got Indiana at plus 650. I believe Michigan State was second when I looked at this earlier, a few days ago and last week. Indiana now at plus 650. Michigan State plus 700. And UCLA and Ohio State are tied for the 4th best odds in the Big Ten right now at plus 850. So should Ohio State gotten more love in this preseason poll? Yeah, probably. But they also got a first place vote, and this poll doesn't really matter. The second major takeaway here, this should be another wild season in the Big Ten. There's no consensus here. You've got 6 teams receiving first place votes. Purdue gets over half of them. From there, you get Indiana with 7, UCLA and Illinois with 2, Michigan State and Ohio State with 1. And Ohio State with 1 first place vote projected to finish 8th. How that makes sense, I don't know, but that's where we are. And speaking of that first place vote, I've got the name of who picked Ohio State to finish first in the conference. And not only do I have the name, I also have the reasoning behind it. So let me grab that for you really quickly here. The name of the voter who picked Ohio State first, Tyler Talkman. On Twitter, you can find him at Tyler_T15. Now, I messaged him and I said, hey, why did you pick Ohio State first? He said, look, they have one of the best backcourts in the Big Ten. They've got one of the most talented front courts. Jake Diebler turned the entire trajectory of the team at the snap of a finger last season, and there's not an obvious favorite to win the league. Now, when we get into this season preview series, we're going to talk more about maybe who this favorite would be. To me, I think Purdue is the favorite, and I think it's pretty clear that Purdue is the favorite, but at least one writer doesn't see it that way. And the last thing that I'll say about this, Ohio State projected to finish 8th. I sent a text to someone within the program that's as specific as I'll be, and they said, yeah, Deebs is going to use this as motivation for the team. You can be really optimistic about Ohio State basketball coming into this season. I'm optimistic about Ohio State basketball at this point. But the fact of the matter is that there's a lot of roster turnover. This is a brand new coach, and you're going to have a lot of moving pieces, a lot of new pieces slotting in. Will they mix and will they mesh? This first game against Texas is far from a gimme, and it's going to be really, really hard to beat Texas. Very talented roster when you've got a very talented roster on paper, but can they put it together actually on the floor? Regardless, head coach Jake Diebler will be taking this. He will be using it as motivation, saying, hey, people don't believe in you. There's a lot of talent on this team. They don't care. They don't see it. They don't think you're going to be good. He's going to use that as added motivation, where practices have been very intense up to this point. I've tweeted about it previously, I think last week, maybe the week before. And it's true that practice is very intense. This is going to add to that. So does it really matter that Ohio State picked to finish 8th by a media poll that's not even official, sponsored by the Big Ten? No, not really. But it does go to show, it shows where some teams are projected to finish, and overall, what's the mood on a team like Ohio State. All right. Speaking of the preseason awards, we're getting into that time of the year, which is fantastic. Bruce Thornton, he's won some preseason honors. So 2024-25 preseason All Big Ten team announced, and we have not 1, not 2, not 3. I know I sound like Chris Bosh or Dwayne Wade, LeBron James, whoever said that. Not 4, not 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 players make the 2024-25 preseason All Big Ten team. Makes sense because there's 10 teams in the conference, except for there's not. And we're picking 10 players, apparently. Your Big Ten preseason player of the year is Braden Smith from Purdue. Good for him. He's the only unanimous selection out of 10. I don't really care about the names, but here's what I care about. So Purdue is the preseason number 1 and they have the preseason player of the year. Okay, that's fine. That makes sense. Indiana projected to finish second. They've got Armabalo. Cool. He's on this list. Teams 3 through 5 projected in the Big Ten have zero. They have zero players on this list. You continue on. You've got Oregon, Rutgers, and Ohio State projected to finish 6th through 8th, respectively. They each get one. Iowa, where are they projected to finish? 11th. The Hawkeyes and the Fighting Fran McCaffreys, they get one. And then each of the projected 4 worst teams in the Big Ten all get one player. How does this make any sense? If we're voting on who we think the best players are going to be, shouldn't those best players be on the best teams? How does it make any sense that the 4 worst teams projected to finish in the Big Ten all get one, yet the number 3, 4, and 5 teams projected to finish in the Big Ten literally don't get a single player out of those 3 teams? UCLA, Illinois, Michigan State. Sorry, you out of luck. No preseason honors there. Bruce Thornton does make the team. However, for Ohio State, in case you care, Peyton Sandfort from Iowa makes it. Dawson Garcia from Minnesota on there. Brooks Barnheiser from Northwestern on there. Jackson Shelstad, he's on there at Oregon. Ace Baldwin, returning to Penn State. He gets the nod. And then Dylan Harper, the only freshman on this list over at Rutgers, and Gray Osabor, the transfer into Washington, is on the list as well. It's odd. It's weird, but it is what it is at this point in the season. It's content, so we talk about it. Congrats to Bruce Thornton. You would expect very, very big things from him coming into the junior season for Bruce Thornton. Okay. Had a couple visits occur this weekend. We've also got a couple commitment dates to keep our eyes on as well. Jerry Easter, class of 2025. He was in top 35-ish, top 40-ish recruit for Ohio State. He's a big-time target. The Buckeyes have been in on him for a while. And Amari Bynum, a top 100-ish center overall, also was on campus over the weekend. If you want to hear how they went, I'm just going to tell you. It went generally okay. All of these visits, you're never going to hear anyone inside the program say, it could have been better. Most of the time, these visits are going to be good. You're not really going to get any intel or anything like that. But both of those players were on campus. Neither have commitment dates set at this time. But we do have a big time commitment date to keep our eyes on. And that is with the number 2 player in the nation, Darren Peterson. He announced on Monday he will be announcing his college decision on November 1st. So we are a couple weeks out from that. He's down to Kansas, Kansas State, Ohio State, and USC. From what I am aware of right now, I think it's about a 50-50 shot whether he goes to Ohio State or Kansas. I don't see it being Kansas State. I don't see it being USC from what I've heard to this point. Now, where Ohio State may be in a sticky situation is this Adidas deal. All I will say about this Adidas sponsorship situation, obviously Kansas is an Adidas school, Ohio State is a Nike school. If this sponsorship carries through past high school, how is Darren Peterson going to end up at Ohio State? I would say he's probably not. I don't see how it happens. Where we see this being an area of opportunity, though, for Ohio State is some are being told, and the impression is that this Darren Peterson sponsorship with Adidas may end at the end of high school. And once he is in college, that contract is up and he can go get sponsored by Nike or whoever else or no one else. It's his life, his choices, whatever. There's no decision on past high school is essentially what is being communicated to the Ohio State side. Now, if I'm reading the tea leaves and I have no inside information, no intel on this, my guess would be maybe Darren Peterson and his camp, who have been with Ohio State and recruited heavily by Ohio State. Even you go back to his first cut list of his top 8 to his reopened recruitment and then his new cut list of his top 8 and now his top 4, it's always been Ohio State in there, along with Kansas. Those have been the two major players in the recruitment for one of the top players in the class of 2025. If I'm reading the tea leaves, I'm wondering, man, Ohio State was really aggressive in NIL. Not only were they really aggressive in NIL, but they've got a new head coach in Jake Diebler. They probably want to make a splash. They have the resources to make a splash. Are you using Ohio State as a pawn, as a leveraging tool to try to get more NIL out of another school? I'm on the flip side, top 2, maybe the best player in your class. Do you really need any more bargaining power? Do you really need that much more help to leverage yourself and have a better position at getting NIL? Probably not when you have the sponsorship money for sure coming in. So we'll see. I just wonder about that. Right now, I mean, I've had people flood the DMs and say, hey, does Ohio State really have a realistic shot to land Darren Peterson? Yeah, 100% they do. Do I feel like Kansas is still probably a little bit of leader? Yeah, I'd say 55-45. We'll see on that. Now, another player set to make his decision this month, not November, but this month, is Isaiah Dennis. I've tried to get a feel. I've tried to understand where is Ohio State on this. Number one, Ohio State feels like it is in good position to have a really good shot to land Isaiah Dennis. Are they the leader right now? I don't know. I don't know if Ohio State even knows. When you announce your commitment date, that means that you probably do know where you're going. That doesn't mean that the program knows where that player is going all the time. So we'll see potentially where Dennis will end up. I think that North Carolina making a push definitely doesn't hurt or doesn't help Ohio State's chances of landing him. But what doesn't hurt is the fact that you've got a guy who recruited them at NC State and Joel Justice, now at Ohio State, recruiting a guy that Ohio State has already been in on. So Ohio State has a real chance to land him. I'm hoping to have some kind of info, some kind of intel, some kind of guess before he makes his decision known and before maybe some leanings get out or anything like that. I'll try to uncover it. I'll try to dig. We'll see what happens. But I definitely do think Ohio State is 100% in play for Isaiah Dennis, and Ohio State is 100% in play for Darren Peterson and for Amari Bynum and for Jerry Easter. We will see what happens with all that. But this is going to be a big month for recruiting for Ohio State. Okay. A lot to cover on the show. We've covered a lot. A few things to cover, two things to cover outside of Ohio State basketball, and then we'll get on with it. So the first thing I'm going to cover is here's what's coming for the month. The season preview series is upon us. So you're getting this episode today on Tuesday. You're going to get your second episode of the week on Thursday. And from here on out, we're probably going to go posted, or not episodes, sorry, articles posted on Ohio State Athletics media website before they publish one Ohio State basketball piece. That's not the case here. Again, this is your, my opinion, I'm biased. Go find other spots if you can. This is your best spot to find Ohio State basketball coverage heading into the season. So the season preview series is going to cover, obviously, the team. We're going to take a look at the roster. We're going to break it down. We're going to talk about the front court. We're going to talk about the back court. Then we're going to talk about the non-conference schedule. We're going to talk about the Big Ten conference schedule. What are the biggest games? What are the biggest matchups? Are there trap games on this schedule? Where could Ohio State be in trouble? Where could Ohio State really make its mark? All of those types of things. We're also going to talk about the Big Ten landscape as a whole. Where do we project Ohio State to finish? And then we'll do some predictions as well for Ohio State, for the Big Ten. And like last year, we'll predict a Final Four and a national champion because it feels right. This is an Ohio State show, of course, but we want to cover some college basketball at this point. So we're going to do that as well. But coming to you on off season, it's been a new head coach. They've got a brand new staff. They brought in a brand new roster. They've made some moves in the high school recruiting space as well. So I'm going to cover all of that. So this would be kind of the primer where if you've taken some time away from Ohio State basketball because you've been a big baseball fan, you're big in the NFL, college football, that's fine. I love all of those sports as well. This is one of the best times of the year, maybe the best time of the year for sports because you've got the NFL. Although, if you live in the state of Ohio like me, and if your fandom is like mine in the NFL, doesn't matter. The majority of listeners of the show probably have had their hearts torn out and spit on and chewed on and stomped on multiple times this year. If you're a Browns or a Bengals fan, I'm not willing to unite with the other side of that, but for those of you who cheer for the more successful of those two franchises over, I don't know, the time since JFK has been assassinated, then we accept you and we cry with you. If you're a Steelers fan, congrats. May the steam not run out with all the momentum that you're enjoying. It's a great time of year for sports. You got the MLB playoffs, you got the NBA getting started, college football, Ohio State football is obviously rolling along, big game against Oregon. But we cover only Ohio State basketball, which means if you miss some shows, if you miss some time, if you miss some context to what's going on in the offseason, I'm going to make sure to cover that with you on the next show. And on top of that, a whole lot more. And now, one other announcement that I will make before we close off the show. So, this will be my second full season covering Ohio State basketball on the Views from the Shop podcast. Started this podcast in February of not last season, but the season before. Not going to rack my brain on what year that was. 2022, maybe. Could be wrong. All that said, I started this show because I felt there was a huge, huge void for Ohio State basketball coverage in the media space. Everyone, as I scroll through Twitter, whether it's March, whether it's January, whether it's July, it doesn't matter when. Even if it's only college basketball season, if it's February, I'm seeing more content constantly on Twitter, on social media about Ohio State football than Ohio State basketball. Here's the facts. Ohio State basketball, blue blood, if it wasn't for football. That is a fact. Most national championship appearances, most Final Fours, most All-Americans, most Big Ten championships, all of those things in comparison to just about any Big Ten program and comparing nationally. They are one of 8, I think, programs with double-digit Final Fours. We talked about this with head coach Jake Diebler on our last show. This is a big-time program. More people need to talk about them. That's why I was here, and I wanted to scratch the itch of the past life I lived in journalism and working in an athletics department. So I started this show. Honestly, I didn't even think I was going to post anything. I thought I was just going to record it and say, okay, well, that was fun. That was a fun 30 minutes. That's that. Instead, I make a Twitter, and instead things start to grow. And now I'm to the point where I have the opportunity to talk with players, text coaches, all those types of things, people within the program who you've never heard of. I get the chance to speak with every week and really start to understand the pulse of Ohio State basketball. I'm not going to say I'm the biggest insider for Ohio State basketball. I'm not Adam Jardy or anything like that, but things have gone well. And things have gone so well to this point. I said a couple weeks ago, I just said it out there very lightly. Hey, I'm going to open up this show to sponsorships. And there's been one brand that I have been loving and that I've been using to help prep for this show. And while I had some others reach out, I've decided we're going to have one exclusive presenting sponsor for this upcoming season, and that is CBB Analytics, college basketball analytics. It's cbbanalytics.com. That's where you can find them. I've talked about them before. CBB Analytics is used by several Division I, Division II, Division III, men's and women's college basketball programs to game plan, to self-scout, to get ready for games, and to be as highly analytical as possible. They have better stats, better searches and queries that you can make than anywhere else out there. And CBB Analytics is our official and exclusive presenting sponsor for the Views from the Shop podcast for this upcoming season. I chose them specifically because I love what they do, and it felt right given that it's a college basketball podcast. So I'm very excited to have CBB Analytics aboard. We're going to talk about them. We're going to use them. We're going to have some giveaways and some opportunities to get signed up for discounts, all those types of things on their website. but I'm excited to have them here with us moving forward. So give CBB Analytics some love on Twitter, on Instagram, all of those types of things. Check out their website. We'll talk more about them in short order, but excited to have them along. And I'm excited to have you along as well. We've got a big month coming up here as we get ready for Ohio State basketball to tip off against Texas on November 4th. We're less than a month away from the Jake Diebler era at Ohio State basketball. So excited to run through that with you. I appreciate you listening or watching today's show. It's been a pleasure. Excited to kick off the season preview series. Until next time, thank you for listening. I appreciate it more than you will know, and I will shut up before you shut me off. Go Bucks.